Admiral Vexara pressed her crystalline hand against the cold metal wall of the command center. Through the cracked windows, she could see the enemy ships moving closer. They looked like giant metal spiders made of sharp angles and glowing red. Lights. The Devourers had been hunting her people for 200 years, and now they were almost finished with their terrible work. The Zephyrian homeworld burned below them. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were now just smoking holes in the ground. The beautiful crystal towers that once reached toward the stars lay broken and scattered. Her people, the proud Zephians who had ruled 3 star systems, were down to their last few ships hiding behind this small moon. "Admiral, they have broken through our outer defenses," said Commander Velinith. His blue crystal skin flickered with patterns of fear and sadness. "We have maybe 6 hours before they find us." Vexara nodded slowly. She had known this day would come. The Devourers were not like other enemies. They could not be reasoned with or fought off forever. They were machines with one simple goal: destroy all living things and turn their worlds into more machines. "How many ships do we have left?" she asked. 12, Admiral. "All badly damaged. Most of our weapons are gone. 12 ships. Out of the thousands they had started with." Vexara remembered when the Zephyrian fleet had been the pride of this part of the galaxy. Their ships were works of art, grown from living crystal and powered by the songs of their crews. Now they were hiding like frightened animals. The Devourers had come from the dark space between the stars. No one knew where they came from originally. They just appeared at the edge of a star system and began their work. First, they would destroy all the ships and space stations. Then they would land on the planets and break everything down into raw materials. Finally, they would use those materials to build more of themselves. 17 different species had tried to stop them. All had failed. The Devourers learned from every battle, became stronger and smarter. They never got tired, never felt fear, never made mistakes. They were perfect killing machines. "Admiral, we are receiving a message from the surface," said the communications officer. "It is from the evacuation centers." "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was weak and full of static. "Admiral, this is Counselor Zethan. The machines have found our shelters. We ... We do not have much time. Tell the galaxy what happened here. Tell them not to make our mistakes." The transmission cut off. Vexara closed her eyes and felt the grief wash over her. Millions of her people were dying down there, and she could do nothing to save them. "Admiral," said Velinith quietly, "perhaps it is time." She knew what he meant. For weeks they had talked about sending one final message into space. Not a call for help, because they knew no help would come. The galaxy had learned to run from the Devourers, not fight them. But maybe they could warn others. Maybe their death could save someone else. "Begin preparing the quantum transmitter," she ordered. "Use all remaining power." "All power, Admiral? That will leave us defenseless." "We are already defenseless, Commander. At least this way, our deaths might mean something." The crew worked quickly and quietly. They had all accepted their fate. The Zephyrians were not a warlike people. They were artists and philosophers, scientists and dreamers. They had built beautiful cities and composed music that could make stars weep. But they were not fighters, not really, not like the humans. They had heard stories about humans. Vexara had read about them in the old galactic databases. A young species from a small blue world. They were supposed to be violent and unpredictable, but also strangely loyal to each other. Most of the galaxy avoided them because they seemed dangerous. But right now, Vexara almost envied them their reputation for violence. "Transmitter ready, Admiral," reported Velinith. Vexara walked to the communication station. This would be The last message the Zephyrian Confederation would ever send. She wanted to make it count. "Begin recording," she said, and her voice was steady despite her fear. "To anyone who can hear this message, I am Admiral Vex Ara of the Zephyrian Confederation. We are the last of our people. For 2 centuries, we have fought against the machines that call themselves the Devourers. We have failed." She paused, watching through the window as more red lights appeared in the distance. The enemy was getting closer. The Devourers cannot be stopped by conventional weapons. They learn from every attack, adapt to every strategy. They do not feel pain or fear or mercy. They see all organic life as a disease to be cured. 17 species have fallen before them. We are the 18th. An explosion rocked the station. One of their outer guard ships had been found and destroyed. If there are others out there who value life over order, who fight for more than just survival, remember us. Remember that we tried. Remember that we loved our children and our art and our dreams. The machines can destroy our bodies, but they cannot understand what made us who we were. Another explosion, closer this time. Red warning lights flashed throughout the command center. To any who have the courage to face these monsters, learn from our failure. Do not fight them with honor and rules of war. They have no honor. Fight them with everything you have, every dirty trick, every desperate measure. Show them no mercy, because they will show you none. The lights flickered as power systems began to fail. The Devourers had found them. This is our final message. We go now to join our ancestors among the stars. May others learn from our sacrifice. May others succeed where we have failed. Remember the Zephyrian Confederation. Remember that we were here, and that we mattered." She nodded to Velenith, who sent the message racing through subspace to every corner of the galaxy. Then she turned to face the main screen as the first Devourer ships came into view. They were beautiful in their terrible way. Perfect geometric shapes covered in weapons and sensors. No wasted space, no decoration, no sign that they had ever been built by beings who understood beauty or joy. They were pure function, pure death. "It has been an honor serving with you all," Vexara said to her crew. They stood together in the command center, watching their enemies approach. In a few minutes, it would all be over. The Zephyrian Confederation would be nothing but a memory, another species consumed by the endless hunger of the machines. But somewhere in the galaxy, her message was traveling faster than light, reaching worlds and civilizations that might learn from their failure. That would have to be enough. The first shots lit up the darkness, and Admiral Vex Ara of the Zephyrian Confederation prepared to make her final stand. Dr. Sarah Chun was halfway through her 3rd cup of coffee when the computers started going crazy. The night shift at the Arecibo 2 facility was usually quiet, just her and the machines listening to the endless whispers of space. But tonight, something was different. The signal came in strong and clear at 2:47 a.m. Sarah stared at her screens, not believing what she was seeing. This was not random noise from a pulsar or interference from a satellite. This was clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, and clearly not from Earth. Her hands shook as she began recording everything. The signal was complex, layered with what looked like mathematical sequences and star charts. But underneath all the technical data, there was something else. Something that made her heart race. It sounded like a goodbye. Sarah had dreamed of this moment her entire life. First contact with an alien civilization. But she had always imagined it would be exciting, hopeful. Not this desperate cry from across the galaxy. She worked through the night, running the signal through every translation program she had. By sunrise, she had enough to know this was real and important. By noon, she was standing in front of the director of the Global Space Monitoring Network, trying to explain why the world was about to change forever. You are certain this is genuine? Director Williams asked for the 5th time. As certain as I can be without meeting them in person, Sarah replied. The signal shows every sign of coming from an advanced civilization. The mathematics check. Out, the star charts match our observations of that region of space. And the message, Director, they are dying. Within hours, the message was racing up every chain of command on Earth. The President of the United States was awakened at 3 a.m. The Secretary General of the United Nations called an emergency session. Military leaders around the world suddenly found themselves discussing something they had never planned for: how to respond to a distress call from another star system. The translation teams worked around the clock. The Zephyrian language was unlike anything human linguists had seen, but the mathematical concepts were universal. Slowly, painfully, the full message became clear. They were the last survivors of their species. The machines called Devourers had hunted them across the galaxy. 17 other civilizations had already fallen. They were asking not for rescue, because they knew it was too late, but for someone to remember them. President Martinez stood before the United Nations 3 days later. The Great Assembly Hall was packed with representatives from every nation on Earth. For once, they were not arguing about trade or territory or ideology. They were faced with something bigger than their small human concerns. Fellow citizens of Earth, the President began. 3 days ago, we received proof that we are not alone in the universe. We also learned that the universe is far more dangerous than we ever imagined. She played the translated message for the assembly. Even through the cold electronic translation, the desperation and sadness came through clearly. When it ended, the hall was silent. They are not asking us to save them, Martinez continued. They know it is too late for that. They are asking us to remember them, to learn from their failure. But I believe we can do more than that. The Chinese representative stood up. Madam President, are you suggesting we attempt to travel to their star system? The distance is impossible. Even if we could build ships fast enough, it would take decades to reach them. Not decades, said Dr. Patricia Hawking, the world's leading expert on theoretical physics. I have been working on this problem since the message arrived. Using our most advanced fusion drives and gravitational assist techniques, we could reach the Kepler system in 8 months. The room erupted in arguments. 8 months to cross interstellar space was still impossible by conventional thinking. But Dr. Hawking's calculations were sound. By pushing human technology to its absolute limits, by risking everything on untested theories, it could be done. Even if we could reach them, said the Russian delegate. What could we do? Our weapons are primitive compared to what these devourers must possess. We would be flying into a battle we cannot win. Maybe, said General Patricia Hayes, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but we would be flying into it together. For the first time in human history, we would be united behind a single cause. The debates raged for hours. Some argued it was suicide to reveal humanity's existence to a hostile galaxy. Others said they had a moral duty to try. Still others claimed the whole thing might be an elaborate hoax. But in the end, the decision was simpler than anyone expected. A young delegate from Kenya stood up and said what many were thinking. They asked for help. How can we live with ourselves if we do not try? The vote was not even close. 187 nations voted to authorize Project Exodus. Only 6 voted against, and even they pledged to provide support. Within hours, every military base on Earth was buzzing with activity. Every shipyard began working around the clock. The International Space Station became the command center for the largest construction project in human history. Admiral Jessica Park found herself in charge of humanity's first interstellar military expedition. She had spent her career preparing for wars that might happen on Earth. Now she was preparing for a war that was definitely happening 347 light years away. "Admiral, we have 800 ships committed so far," reported her aide. "Everything from military destroyers to converted cargo haulers. Even some civilian ships are volunteering." Park looked at the massive display showing Earth's growing fleet. It was impressive and terrifying at the same time. Most of these ships had never been designed for combat, let alone interstellar combat against an enemy they knew nothing about. "What? About weapons?" she asked. "Every nuclear weapon we can spare. Particle beam systems borrowed from the moon mining operations. Kinetic impactors, railguns, even some experimental stuff from the Black projects." It was not much against an enemy that had destroyed 17 civilizations. But it was what they had. The hardest part was not building the ships or gathering the weapons. The hardest part was deciding who would go. Nearly 2 million people volunteered in the first week. Teachers, farmers, soldiers, students, grandparents, teenagers. All willing to leave Earth behind for a cause they barely understood. Captain Maria Santos had been commanding a cargo hauler when the call came. Now she found herself in charge of the retrofit operation that would turn her ship into a weapon of war. Her crew of 12 became a crew of 50, including Marines who had never seen space combat and engineers who were making up the rules as they went along. "Captain," said her first officer, "are we really doing this? Flying across the galaxy to fight monsters we have never seen?" Maria looked out at the growing fleet surrounding Earth. Ships from every nation, every walk of life, all preparing for an impossible journey. "We are doing this, Commander, because someone asked for help, and we are the kind of species that answers." 2 weeks after the first message, Earth sent its reply. It was simple and direct, broadcast on the same frequency the Zephyrians had. Used, Zephyrian Confederation. This is humanity of the planet Earth in the Sol system. We have received your message. We hear your pain, and we will not forget your sacrifice. But we are coming. We do not know if we can save you, but we will try. Hold on. Help is on the way. The message raced across space at the speed of light, carrying with it something the galaxy had not seen in a very long time. Hope. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the final preparations. In 2 months, they would begin. The longest journey in human history. Most of them would probably never see Earth again. But they were going anyway, because that was what humans did. They answered when someone called for help. A human fleet left Earth on a Tuesday morning. 892 ships, carrying the hopes and fears of an entire planet, burned their engines and headed for the stars. Captain Maria Santos watched through her viewport as the blue marble that had been home to every human who ever lived grew smaller and smaller behind them. Her ship, the converted cargo hauler Indomitable, was part of Battle Group 7. Around her flew ships that had never been meant for war. There was the Spirit of Detroit, originally built to haul ore from the asteroid belt. The Mumbai Express had carried passengers between Earth and Mars for 20 years. The research vessel Darwin had been studying deep space phenomena just months ago. Now they were all weapons of war, heading into a battle they might not survive. "Captain," said Lieutenant Rodriguez, her communications officer, "we are receiving the morning briefing from Admiral Park." Maria nodded and activated the main screen. Admiral Park appeared, looking tired but determined. Behind her, the bridge of the flagship Endeavour buzzed with activity. "Good morning, fleet," Park began. "We have been traveling for 3 months now, and I wanted to update you on our progress. Long-range sensors show no sign of devourer activity in our path. We remain on schedule to reach the Kepler system in 5 months. 3 months. It felt like a lifetime to Maria, but also like no time at all. Every day brought them closer to an enemy they still barely understood. Every day meant more training, more preparation, more wondering if they were flying toward their deaths. Intelligence teams have been analyzing the Zephyrian transmissions we received during their final battle, Park continued. We now have a better understanding of Devourer tactics and capabilities. The briefing materials are being distributed to all ship commanders. Maria had read every report, watched every recording. The Devourers fought like machines, which made sense because that was what they were. No emotion, no hesitation, no mercy. They calculated the most efficient way to destroy their enemies, and then did exactly that. But humans did not fight like machines. Humans fought with anger and hope and desperate courage. Maria hoped that would be enough. Remember, Park concluded, we are not just fighting for the Zephyrians. We are fighting for every living thing in the galaxy. Every species that dreams, every civilization that creates art, every child who looks up at the stars and wonders what is out there. That is what we represent. That is why we are here. The transmission ended, and Maria turned to her crew. They came from 12 different countries and spoke 8 different languages, but they had become family during the long journey through space. There was Chun, the engineer from Beijing, who could make broken systems work with spare parts, and determination. There was Ahmed, the weapons specialist from Cairo, who had never fired a shot in anger, but knew every system on the ship. There was Johnson, the pilot from Texas, who could fly anything with engines and had volunteered the day the recruitment started. You heard the Admiral, Maria said. 5 more months. How are we looking? Weapon systems are at 90% efficiency, reported Ahmed. The new railgun is working better than expected. Nuclear torpedoes are ready for deployment. Engines are running smooth, added Johnson. Fuel reserves are good. We could push harder if we needed to, but it would cost us, Maria nodded. Every ship in the fleet faced the same choices. Push harder and arrive with less fuel for the battle, or maintain speed and hope they were not too late. The reports from the Kepler system were not encouraging. The last Zephyrian transmission had been received 2 weeks ago. It was just a brief signal, barely strong enough to detect. Either they were nearly dead, or they were hiding very well. Captain, said Rodriguez, we are receiving a message from the Mumbai Express. Captain Patel wants to speak with you. Put him through. Rayesh Patel appeared on the screen. His ship was flying alongside the Indomitable, close enough that Maria could see it through her viewport. Patel had been a passenger, ship captain for most of his career. Now he was commanding a warship carrying enough firepower to level a city. Maria, how are your people holding up? He asked. It was a question they all asked each other regularly. The journey was taking its toll on everyone. 8 months in space was a long time, especially when you knew you were heading for a battle. Some crews were handling it better than others. We are managing, Maria replied. Johnson keeps threatening to teach everyone to play poker, which might be more dangerous. And the Devourers. How about you? My navigator is having nightmares about machine spiders. My engineer is writing poetry about home. My weapons officer keeps asking if we are really going to do this. Patel smiled grimly. I tell him yes, we are really going to do this. That was the question everyone asked, sooner or later. Were they really flying across the galaxy to fight an enemy that had destroyed 17 civilizations? Were they really risking everything for aliens they had never met? The answer was always yes. Any word from the other battle groups? Maria asked. Battle Group 3 reports some engine trouble, but nothing serious. Battle Group 5 is running low on coffee, which Captain Morrison says is a critical emergency. Patel laughed. I swear, humans will complain about anything. It was true. Even facing the end of everything they knew, humans found things to complain about. The food was boring. The bunks were uncomfortable. The artificial gravity made everything feel wrong. It was strangely comforting. After Patel signed off, Maria made her rounds through the ship. In the engine room, Sean was training a team of mechanics who had been accountants and teachers back on Earth. In the weapons bay, Ahmed was explaining the finer points of nuclear torpedo guidance to a group of volunteers who had never seen military equipment before. They were all learning as they went. None of them had trained for interstellar warfare, because no one had ever imagined such a thing would be necessary. But they were adapting, the way humans always did. In the mess hall, Maria found Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the fleet's chief xenobiologist. Harper had spent her career studying the possibility of alien life. Now she was preparing for humanity's first contact with a friendly alien species, assuming any Zephyrians were still alive when they arrived. "Doctor, how are your preparations coming along?" Maria asked. Harper looked up from her tablet. "As well as can be expected, given that I am working from a sample size of one species and a few radio transmissions. The Zephyrians appear to be silicon-based life forms, probably evolved from crystalline structures. Their psychology seems to value art and contemplation over warfare, which explains why they lost to the Devourers. And the Devourers themselves? Pure artificial intelligence, as far as I can tell. No individual personalities, no emotions, no goals beyond expansion and efficiency. They see organic life as a problem to be solved." Harper paused. "Captain, I have to ask, do you really think we can win this?" Maria had been asked that question dozens of times during the journey. The honest answer was that she did not know. The Devourers had advantages in technology, numbers, and experience. But humans had something else. "Doctor, the Devourers have never fought humans before. They have never faced a species that will fly across the galaxy for strangers. They have never met beings who get angry when someone asks for help and no one comes." Maria smiled. "I think they are in for a surprise." That night, Maria stood in her quarters looking out at the stars. Somewhere ahead of them, in a star system she could not yet see, the battle for the future of organic life was waiting. Behind them, Earth continued its ancient dance around the sun, probably wondering if their children would ever come home. The fleet flew on through the darkness, carrying with it humanity's first message to the galaxy. "We are here. We have heard you. And we are coming to help." Whether help would be enough remained to be seen. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler system, and what they saw made everyone's blood run cold. The system was dying. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, staring at the tactical display. In horror, 3 planets orbited the star, and all of them were under attack. Massive geometric shapes, each the size of a city, hung in orbit around the worlds like mechanical vultures. These were the Devourers, and they were even more terrifying than the reports had suggested. "Admiral," reported Commander Hayes, "we are detecting Zephyrian signatures. 12 ships, heavily damaged, hiding behind the 4th moon of the outer planet. 12 ships, out of thousands." Park felt her heart sink, but she pushed the feeling aside. 12 was more than 0, and that meant some of the Zephyrians were still alive. "Open a channel to all Devourer units," she ordered. "Ma'am?" Hayes looked confused. "You heard me, Commander. All channels, maximum power." The communications officer worked frantically at his console. "Channel open, Admiral." Park took a deep breath. This would be humanity's first words to a hostile alien intelligence. She wanted to make them count. "Attention all Devourer units. This is Admiral Jessica Park of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. You are ordered to cease all hostile actions against the Zephyrian Confederation and withdraw from this system immediately. You have 30 seconds to comply." The response was immediate. Every Devourer ship in the system turned toward the human fleet. Their weapons began charging with an ominous red glow. "Well," said Park grimly, I guess that is our answer. All ships. Battle stations. Signal the fleet. Weapons free. Engage at will. The first wave of Devourer attack came in the form of thousands of small hunter-killer drones. They moved like a swarm of angry wasps, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a human fighter. But Admiral Park had studied the reports from previous battles. She knew the Devourers always started with a probe attack to test their enemies. Capabilities. Point defense systems engage, she ordered. All ships tight formation. Do not let them separate us. The space around the human fleet lit up with weapons fire. Laser beams and particle cannons reached out to swat the attacking. Drones, nuclear-tipped missiles exploded in brilliant flashes. The humans were fighting for their lives before they had even properly entered the system. Captain Maria Santos watched from the bridge of the Indomitable as her ship's guns tracked and destroyed drone after drone. Her crew worked with mechanical precision, but she could see the fear in their eyes. They had trained for this moment for 8 months, but training was nothing like the real thing. "Captain," shouted Lieutenant Rodriguez over the noise of battle, "the Spirit of Detroit is taking heavy damage. Captain Williams is requesting assistance." Maria looked at her tactical display. The converted freighter was surrounded by drones, its point defense systems failing. In minutes, it would be destroyed. "Johnson, take us in," she ordered. "Ahmed, prepare the railgun. We are going to clear them a path." The Indomitable dove toward the struggling ship, its weapons blazing. The railgun fired once, twice, 3 times, each shot destroying multiple drones with pure kinetic energy. It was crude compared to the elegant energy weapons of the Devourers, but it worked. "This is Captain Williams," came a voice over the radio. "Thank you, Indomitable. We owe you one." "Save it for the victory party," Maria replied. But she wondered if any of them would live to see a victory party. The drone attack was just the beginning. As the humans pushed deeper into the system, the real Devourer ships began to engage. These were massive constructs of living metal, each one unique, but following the same basic design principles. No wasted space, no decoration, just weapons and engines and armor, arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Admiral Park had divided her fleet into battle groups, each one designed to support the others. But the Devourers had been fighting wars for 1,000 years. They knew how to break up formations, how to isolate enemy ships and destroy them piecemeal. "Admiral," reported Hayes, "Battle Group 5 is under heavy attack. They are requesting permission to break formation." "Negative," Park replied immediately. "If we scatter, they will pick us off one by one." All ships maintain formation and continue the advance. It was easier said than done. The Devourers fought like a single organism, their ships coordinating. Attacks with machine precision. They would concentrate fire on one human ship until it was destroyed, then move on to the next target. It was methodical, efficient, and terrifying. But the humans were not fighting like the Zephyrians had. Where the crystalline beings had relied on honor and traditional tactics, the humans fought dirty. They used every trick they could think of, every advantage they could find. Captain Rayesh Patel proved this when his ship, the Mumbai Express, found itself facing a Devourer construct 3 times its size. Instead of trying to fight it conventionally, he ordered his helmsman to ram the enemy ship at full speed. "All hands, brace for impact," he announced calmly over the intercom. "It has been an honor serving with you." The Mumbai Express hit the Devourer ship like a guided missile, its nuclear reactor set to overload on impact. The explosion destroyed both ships, but it also created a gap in the enemy formation that 3 other human ships were able to exploit. Admiral Park watched the tactical display as the red dot representing Patel's ship disappeared. She had known. Rayesh, for 15 years, had served with him on joint missions before this war began. Now he was gone, along with his entire crew. But his sacrifice had meaning. The Devourers had never faced enemies willing to use kamikaze tactics. Their logical minds could not compute the possibility that organic beings would deliberately destroy themselves to damage an enemy. It created confusion in their ranks, hesitation in their targeting systems. "Admiral," called Hayes, "we are receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian ships. Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was weak and filled with static, but the emotion was unmistakable. "Human ships, this is Admiral Vex Ara of the Zephyrian Confederation. We cannot believe you came. You actually came." "Admiral Vex Ara." Park replied, "This is Admiral Jessica Park of Earth. We heard your call for help. We are sorry we could not get here sooner." "You came at all," Vex Ara said, and her voice seemed to break. "That is more than we dared hope for. But you must know, these creatures cannot be defeated by conventional means. They adapt to every tactic, counter every strategy. Then we will just have to be unconventional," Park replied grimly, as if to prove her point, the converted research. Ship Darwin demonstrated exactly what she meant. Instead of engaging the Devourers directly, Captain Sarah Kim had ordered her crew to deploy every scientific probe and sensor drone they had. But these were not ordinary probes. The human engineers had packed them with explosives and programmed them to seek out specific electromagnetic signatures. The Devourers, expecting another conventional attack, found themselves dealing with hundreds of tiny bombs that slipped through their defenses and exploded against their hull at weak points identified by the Darwin sensors. It was not enough to destroy the enemy ships, but it damaged their coordination systems and caused several of them to fire on each other by mistake. The battle raged for hours. Human ships died, their crews becoming heroes in the span of seconds, as they gave their lives to protect their comrades. But slowly, impossibly, they were winning. The Devourers had superior technology and numbers, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. They had never fought beings who would sacrifice themselves for strangers, who would turn civilian ships into weapons, who would ram enemy vessels rather than surrender. As the human fleet pressed deeper into the system, Admiral Park opened communications. "With all ships, all vessels, this is Admiral Park. We came here to save the Zephyrians, but we are doing more than that. We are showing this galaxy that there are still those who will stand up to bullies, who will cross space itself to help those in need. Make them remember this day. Make them remember that Earth answered when someone called for help." The battle was far from over, but for the first time since arriving in the system, Admiral Park allowed herself to hope. They might actually pull this off. They might actually win. The tide of battle turned when Captain Maria Santis made a decision that would be remembered for generations. Her ship, the Indomitable, was badly damaged, her weapons systems failing, her crew exhausted. In front of her loomed the largest Devourer construct anyone had ever seen, a massive geometric nightmare that served as the command ship for the entire enemy fleet. "Captain," said Lieutenant Rodriguez, his voice tight with fear, "we cannot match that thing. Our weapons barely scratch. It's armor." Maria looked at her tactical display, then at her crew. These people had followed her across the galaxy, trusted her with their lives, believed in the mission even when it seemed impossible. Now she was about to ask them for the ultimate sacrifice. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over the intercom. "We came here to save people we have never met because it was the right thing to do. Now we have one chance to end this fight and save everyone who is still alive. I am setting course for the command ship. Anyone who wants to transfer to the escape pods has 30 seconds. No one moved. Chun stayed at her engineering station, coaxing more power from the dying engines. Ahmed remained at weapons control, firing their last missiles at the enemy. Johnson held the helm steady, guiding them toward their target. "Captain," said Rodriguez quietly, "it has been an honor." "The honor was mine," Maria replied. Then, louder, "All ships, this is Indomitable. We are making our attack run. Cover us. For as long as you can." The human fleet responded immediately. Every ship that could still fight turned their guns on the command construct, trying to distract it from Maria's approach. The Spirit of Detroit, her hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere, used her last nuclear torpedo to clear a path. The research. Vessel Darwin positioned herself between the Indomitable and the smaller Devourer ships, taking hit after hit to protect Maria's final run. The command construct's weapons turned toward the approaching ship. Energy beams that could slice through steel reached out like fingers of death. The Indomitable shook and buckled under the assault, her armor melting away layer by layer. "Hull breach on decks 4 and 5, reported Chun. "We are losing life." "Support. Keep us together for 30 more seconds," Maria ordered. "That is all I need." She looked out at the enemy ship growing larger in her viewport. This close, she could see the details of its construction. Every angle was perfect, every surface smooth and functional. It was beautiful in its way, like a mathematical equation, made real, but it was also cold and lifeless, built by minds that saw organic life as an error to be corrected. 20 seconds to impact, called Johnson.Maria, activated the ship-wide intercom one last time. "This is for everyone who cannot fight back. This is for all the species that came before us. This is for the right to dream and love and hope. This is for Earth." The Indomitable struck the Devourer command ship at nearly the speed of light, her fusion reactors set to overload on impact. The explosion lit up the entire star system, a brief new sun that outshone the local star for several seconds. When the light faded, both ships were gone. But something had changed in the remaining Devourer fleet. Their movements became erratic. Their coordination failed. The command ship had been their central brain, and now they were just individual machines, trying to fight a war they no longer understood. Admiral Park watched. The enemy fleet begin to scatter and felt tears running down her cheeks. "All ships, press the attack. Do not let them regroup." A battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The remaining Devourer ships fought with desperate efficiency, but they were no longer the coordinated force that had conquered 17 civilizations. They were individual predators, dangerous, but no longer invincible. The humans, meanwhile, fought with a fury born of grief and determination. Every ship they had lost, every friend who had died, every sacrifice made on the long journey from Earth, all of it drove them forward. They showed no mercy because they knew their enemies would show none. Captain Rayesh Patel's brother, commanding the cargo hauler New Delhi, rammed his ship into a Devourer construct that was threatening the wounded Zephyrian vessels, the converted. Mining ship Lunar Pride used her industrial cutting lasers to slice through enemy armor. The passenger liner European Dream deployed her entire complement of maintenance robots, each one now carrying explosives to swarm over a damaged Devourer ship. One by one, the enemy ships fell. Some tried to retreat, but the human fleet pursued them ruthlessly. Admiral Park had given clear orders. None of the Devourers could be allowed to escape and warn others of humanity's existence. The last Devourer ship died 3 hours after the Indomitable's sacrifice. It was a small hunter-killer that had been trying to hide behind the wreckage of a Zephyrian city ship. The human destroyer Vigilant found it and ended it with a single nuclear torpedo. Then, suddenly, it was over. The Kepler system was quiet except for the background radiation of cooling wreckage. The Devourers were gone. Admiral Park slumped in her command chair, exhausted beyond belief. Around her, the bridge crew sat in stunned silence. They had done the impossible. They had defeated an enemy that had never been defeated, but the cost had been terrible. Of the 892 ships that had left Earth 8 months ago, only 347 remained. Over 200,000 humans had died in the battle, including some of the finest people Park had ever known. Maria Santos, Rayesh Patel, Sarah Kim, and hundreds of others had given their lives for aliens they had never met. "Admiral," said Commander Hayes quietly, "we are receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian ships." "Put it through." Admiral Lex Ara appeared on the main screen. The crystalline being looked ancient and tired, her bioluminescent patterns flickering weakly. But there was something else in those alien features that Park recognized. Hope. "Admiral." "Park," Exara said, "we do not have words in any language to thank you for what you have done. Your people have saved not just us, but every living thing in the galaxy. The Devourers are gone, truly gone, for the first time in 1,000 years." "The price was high," Park replied. "Too many good people died today." "They died as heroes," Exara said firmly. "They died so that others might live, so that children might grow up free from the shadow of the machines. That is the greatest death any being can ask for." Over the next several days, the human and Zephyrian fleets worked together to rescue survivors and catalog the damage. The Zephyrian Confederation was reduced to barely 50,000 individuals scattered across 12 ships. But they were alive. Their homeworld was gone, stripped bare by the Devourers. But they could rebuild. More importantly, they had something they had not possessed in 2 centuries. A future Dr. Elizabeth Harper worked alongside Zephyrian scientists to establish proper communication protocols. The 2 species were vastly different, but they shared the most important things: curiosity, creativity, and the capacity to care about others. "Your people are remarkable," said scientist Velineth during one of their sessions. "The Devourers have faced many species, but none who fought as you did. None who came so far to help strangers." "We are not special," Harper replied. "We are just human." But even as she said it, she knew it was not entirely true. Humanity was special, not because they were stronger or smarter than other species, but because they had made a choice. When someone called for help, they answered. When faced with evil, they fought back. When the stakes were highest, they gave everything they had. 3 weeks after the battle, Admiral Park composed a message. To be sent back to Earth, it would take years to reach home. But she wanted the people of Earth to know what their children had accomplished. "To the people of Earth," she began, "we came to save the Zephyrian Confederation, and we succeeded. But we did more than that. We showed the galaxy what humanity stands for. We proved that there are still those who will risk everything for strangers, who will cross the void itself to help those in need." She paused, thinking of all the friends she would never see again, all the heroes whose names would be remembered forever. The cost was high, but the cause was just. We faced an enemy that had never been defeated, and we defeated them. We stood up to a force that saw all organic life as worthless, and we proved them wrong. We answered when someone called for help. And in doing so, we announced to the galaxy that Earth is here, that humans exist, and that we will not tolerate bullies. Meanwhile, Admiral Lex Ara was composing her own message. This one would be broadcast to every world, every species, every civilization that still had the technology to receive it. "To all who hear this message," she began, "the age of the Devourers is over. They have been defeated by a species that calls itself humanity, from a world called Earth. These beings heard our cry for help and came to our aid, crossing impossible distances to fight for people they had never met." Her bioluminescent patterns brightened as she continued. "The galaxy is not as dark as we thought. There are still those who value life over logic, who fight for more than just survival. If you are in need, If you face enemies too strong to defeat alone, remember this day. Remember that when the Zephyrian Confederation called for help, humanity answered. The message spread across the galaxy at the speed of light, carrying with it news that would change everything. The Devourers were gone, destroyed by a species that most civilizations had never heard of.